Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today at SQL Bits. I am very happy to be back. I'm even more happy to be doing a non-tech session. I talk about tech and deep tech stuff day in, day out. So for me, this is really fun because it's not the stuff I do on a daily basis. That said, let's get going. My name is Benny de Jager. I work for Microsoft. I'm in the CAT team. And outside of that, I help run a user group in Belgium. They're called datamines.be. If you've got any questions afterwards, the essence is really simple. I always use the same thing. So if you can spell my name, you will be able to find me. If you cannot spell my name, well, I'm sorry for you, basically. Then, I'm not a fan of pie charts, but it's not the case today. We can just move on and go from there. Today is going to be about asking questions. Asking questions to get meaningful answers. Why is this a topic that I chose to talk about? Well, I work in a team that gets asked questions very often. And it's a bit of the synthesis, the summary of what could we do to help each other better, on both ends. The person that is asking the question, the person that is answering the question. But it's most important for me to stress that we need to ask questions. We really need to ask questions. But there's a few basic elements on how I feel that we should ask these questions to resolve our problems. Mostly, it's just, I want you to think about a few things. What am I doing today? Is that working? Is that not working? Is there something that I should be different? But it is not an absolute truth. This is just a guy on a stage in a town called Farnborough talking about questions for 20 minutes. It's not the absolute truth. There is always a subjective aspect to these things. But why should we ask these questions? Why do we need to bother? Well, we need to ask questions to spur learning, to learn new things. Curiosity killed the cat, but we need to ask questions to keep learning. It also stimulates discussion. Asking questions probably would point out that there might be a difference in opinions or a difference in knowledge, a gap in whatever there exists. But mostly, it fuels innovation. Keep challenging ourselves to learn new things, to keep improving. Keep making sure that we don't stand still and that we don't do the same thing day in, day out. But also, it builds trust. If you can ask those good questions, you can build up a relationship of trust with other people. So for me, these are 4 key reasons of why we should ask these questions. Most importantly, let's try not to stand still. Let's try to keep moving forward to improve what we're doing, to make it more efficient for ourselves. By not asking these questions, we're missing out on opportunities. In Dutch, we've got a saying, if you've not asked the question, you're never going to know. In English, it's probably the same thing, but I don't know. But we miss out on opportunities. You miss out on having the goal, having the fact of learning something that you might otherwise not learn. It can also lead to a false image. If you're not asking the question, people might assume that you understand what is being talked about. So it can lead to a false image that, okay, that person knows exactly what we're talking about because it seems clear to them. But it can also be that if you ask that question, they might realize that something wasn't clear when they were explaining it. Or, well, it leads to a high risk of incorrect opinions, challenging each other to make sure that you hash it out together, that you get to a solution. But most importantly, and this is a bit of a double one, we risk time of losing efficiency, we risk losing time, but on the other hand, if the questions aren't right, we'll lose time with those questions. So it's a bit of a double one there. But in the end, I feel that usually we end up gaining efficiency along the road when we get there together. Don't ask, don't get. If you're never asking a question, you're never going to know, essentially. Now, there are a few conditions. First one for me is do the research. We need to ask those questions, but a few simple steps can go a very long way. Are there any existing materials? Is there something out there, for instance, that's recently been published or discussed? Has this question recently been asked in whatever medium you're using within the company or in your community? And well, for instance, if there was a recent answer, can you deduct that answer from there, but do you need confirmation on that? Some simple steps go a very long way. But for me, the essence is, can you really expect someone to put more effort into giving you an answer if you're not putting effort into asking them a question? If you're being lazy with your communication, lazy with asking your questions, how much can you expect from that other person? Finding the right audience is another key condition. Consider who you're asking the question to. Balance the number of recipients. I'm not a fan of teams, let me be very honest, because there are way too many factors, way too many ways of blasting notifications out to 7,000 people at once and expecting that someone will answer. If you broad with the audience, you might risk that no one is going to pick up the answer because everyone is assuming that someone else will answer the question. If you only send it to one person, that person might not know. So it's a difficult exercise, but balancing that audience, balancing the number of recipients can really help you along the way. But be mindful, they might have a lot on their plate. They might have a very busy day, or there might be in the last day before their 2-week vacation. We need to be mindful about each other. But if possible, try to do some verification before you're asked the question. But ultimately, it's about respect, respecting each other. It's one of the key conditions for me if we're talking about asking questions and answering these questions as well. Respect goes a long way when it comes from both parties. Because when someone is answering a question, they're carving out time to help you or to help the problem that you're having with your customer, with a peer, something. They're carving out time to help you. And like I said, there might be situations at play. It might be not a good day for them. They might not be in a very good mood. Who knows? Something can always be at play. But for me, I'm a simple man. I've been raised with the words of please and thank you go a very long way. For me, even in a professional way, in a professional environment, that is still something I highly value. And it doesn't always apply these days, but I do feel it's really important. And it boils down to treating others the way that you would like to be treated, essentially. And well, let's be honest. Avoid hiding ulterior motives. If you're asking a question and you know something else is at play, be honest about it. Provide facts about the severity, about the timing, about the consequences. Has this question been sitting in your inbox for 3 weeks and is the customer now expecting an answer tomorrow? Well, I'm sorry. I'm not going to drop my entire day for something like that. I might do it, but I would prefer that you're honest about it. So providing facts about these things will probably help you get further along the line. Because if it comes out afterwards, that person is less likely to help you again. And in the end, we're building out relationships for the longer term. That's as simple as it is. And it builds on trust. It is very easy to break. It is very hard to restore, and it takes a long time to build. So trust is a key aspect in this entire process. And well, let's manage the expectations. Be realistic about a timing. Don't expect that someone is going to give you an answer in the next 15 seconds just because you flagged it as a highly important topic. It might not work that way. But also, not every question has an answer. Some questions, they go unanswered. Sometimes it happens. And then, well, you have to go back, you have to figure out how to resolve it. Stuff happens, basically. Or, well, people say no sometimes. I've got a colleague in my team, a Dutch person, who's infamous for using the word no, but that's fine. No is fine to use. I've been having a lot of discussions about that, about the word no, but it is fine. Not everyone will drop everything to help you. So manage those expectations for yourself, but also people depending on that response. Now, let's talk about the buildup of a question. We've covered some of the conditions. Now let's actually go look at what we're doing there. Context for the question is where it gets tricky for me, because the context is key. You need to find a really good balance on what you're providing them, because, well, maybe you're really deep into a certain topic, but I might not be. And I would need your help in your context or what your understanding is of the topic you want to discuss to help you find that answer. So the context is key. And, well, in a way, you need to provide information. Enough information, but not too much information to help answer that question. And then, well, the tricky part is, what's too much information? What's too little information? It depends. I'm sorry. But can I have a drink, please? Thank you. Can I have a drink, please? What are you going to give me? What drink am I getting from you? I've heard 7 different things, which is exactly what I wanted to hear. I'll take coffee, please. But can I have a Twinings English breakfast tea with some sugar and a splash of milk? What am I going to get? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I'm not going to read that. You get the idea. So what's too little, what's too much? Simple example, but it's the exact same thing with a question that you might be asking for the topic at hand. And it's so difficult to balance, but you'll learn, and you'll probably get some feedback from the other person involved that I need a little bit more to understand this or that. So yeah, we'll get there together, essentially. But then, how are you asking that question? This is where I will admit I am a very pedantic a-hole, and I sometimes take advantage of this. Because if you ask closed questions, questions that lead up to a yes, a no, a maybe, it depends, I will give you that answer. Because I'm just that way. It's the way I'm wired. But I will help you afterwards. But there's a very big difference in asking the question on can you do, is it possible to, can feature X be used for, is product A better than product B? If you ask those questions, well, likely the answer is going to be yes, no, maybe, it depends. If you flip that, if you use those open-ended questions, that's probably going to help you along the way. Because how you can do instead of can you do is going to help you a lot. By just using that different word, it opens up the question and you're more likely to get a decent answer. So those closed questions, they're really bad to get a conversation going, and they're really bad to ask those actual questions. But how do we actually go about to describe a problem? How do you start asking that question? For me, there's a few things in there that would really help. Imagine you're stuck with something, you're finding a bug, or you're finding a problem, or something that's not expected in a product. Let's say Tableau, for instance. You're finding a problem in Tableau, and you want to talk about it, you want to get an answer. Well, what is the actual problem? What's the concise description? What is the issue you're actually facing that you're seeing there? What's the situation? Well, do you have any steps to reproduce? What's the scenario where you're encountering that? Or if your customer is doing X, Y, Z, or if you're doing X, Y, Z, this is what I'm running into. Reproduction steps. What are you expecting to happen? What do you think should happen? And the what do you think should happen is difficult because people have opinions, which is fair. And we might have completely different opinions about these things. But the fact that you're describing what you're expecting is probably going to be very useful because it would help me, would help the person on the other side expect and understand what you're actually trying to figure out. But then, well, what is actually happening? The problem above and the observed behavior, that's where the difference is. What I mean with the problem above is like a 2-3 sentence, this is what I'm seeing. And then in the section below, for instance, you could go into, well, okay, this is a more elaborate explanation of what I'm trying to do. So that you have the let's call it the executive summary up top, and then the clear written out explanation on the bottom. Because remember what I said about what is too little information, what is too much information? If you lead with that 2-page section on what the actual problem is, I'm not gonna lie, I have a very short attention span. I'm probably gonna zone out like 3 times. That's the reality. That is essentially what happens there. Now, we have the conditions. We have the question statement. We have the problem. We know what we want to be asking. Now, the only thing that's left to do is actually asking it. Sounds logical, right? So what do? Well, we open up the conversation. And this is where it can get tricky or funky. What's the conventional method? How do you primarily communicate within the company? If you're working in an office, It might probably be easier to just walk up to that desk, thank you so much, walk up to that desk and ask the question. If you're in a remote first company, you're likely using something like Slack or Teams. Maybe you're still using Link, who knows? But what's the thing for you? Now, the thing there is different people have different preferences. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm not a fan of Teams because I lose track of what happens in Teams. I get so many of random messages about Teams meeting chats and then people pinging me with questions that if I look at something and I think, oh yeah, I need to get to that question later, and then 17 different things will have come in and I'll have missed it. So for me, emails work better. But I know colleagues that say, well, no, if you need me to do something, just send me a Teams message. So that's the thing. There's conventional methods, but the difficulty is, well, how does that person that you're trying to reach, or how are the people that you're trying to reach, how do they like to be contacted? It depends, I'm sorry. But consider that target audience. If you're trying to ask like 5, 6 people at the same time, well, it might be better to send out an email. If you're trying to get someone for a really quick answer, it might be better to send a Teams message. If it's something that you expect is going to take like 10, 15 minutes to hash out, it might be better to say, hey, I've got this problem, can I set up some time with you? Instead of randomly calling that person without looking at a schedule. True story. Yeah, so what works best? That's the thing. But then, okay, well, we've had that conversation. Likely there are going to be follow-up conversations. It very, very, very rarely happens that after one question, one answer, it's done. There's usually some follow-up conversations. You can never get it perfect from the get-go. And then it's important to keep asking those same questions to make sure that you get to the problem, that you get to the solution that you're looking for, that you get the information that you're looking for. But then, well, you have the information, we don't need to drag it out. If we've got a 15-minute slot and we're done after 7 minutes, yes, great. I'm going to use those 8 minutes to get coffee to go into the next call. That works. You don't have to drag it out. But make sure that you understand the input. What I find really helpful when I'm asking questions or when I'm answering questions is try to rephrase it in your own words. So if I get it right, this is what you said. Does a few things. Well, you get to make sure that you get the input right, but I also understand, or the other person understand, that the information was well received. So rehashing that, summarizing it, really, really helps. Those follow-up questions, is it okay if I ping you afterwards, if I have a follow-up questions? That's perfectly fine. Try to come to an agreement with that person on where you stand together. Summarizing those key points, as I mentioned, and then after everything has been covered, well, wrap it up. Be thankful. Please and thank you go a very long way. So essentially, that's me in 18 minutes and 15 seconds going through asking questions. I want to thank you so much. I do have slides here. Like I said, if you can spell my name, you will be able to find it, or you can scan the QR code. While people are scanning, I'll happily take questions, and then I will go to the next slide afterwards with the eval link, because I would really appreciate it if you filled out the session evaluation. Any questions? Yes, please.
I have this dilemma where I ask a short question and don't get a correct answer, or ask a long question and no one reads it. Where's the balance? Do I start short and give a follow-up question, or how would you?
It depends. I mean, lead. Yes, sorry. Sorry, excellent. Thank you so much. So there's a dilemma of asking, do I ask a short question and risking not getting the audience, or asking a long question, which might be dragging it out too long, not getting the right information? I would lead with a short question. Hey, can I ask you about X, Y, Z? This is what I'm trying to look for. And then you'll get a confirmation from that person or the group of people, yes, okay, we have something for you. It's the difficult thing. What I have done before, especially if it's an email or if it's a Teams message, I just use a short one, and then, oh yeah, by the way, optionally, here's all of the context below if you want it. It takes some effort on your end, but usually it goes a long way. In a verbal discussion, that's different, but if it's a written discussion, that really helps. Yes, please. TLDR, exactly. Too long, didn't read. Yes. Go ahead, please.
How easy, how easy is it to train someone to your preferences? Because I found there's a particular colleague, no matter what I do, he'll always call and then give the question. I'm just like, give the question first so I can look into it, then call. And I'm over at 10.
Yeah. So if I get it right, is how do you find out preferences of the people? Because some people are, it's hard to figure them out. It's really hard. I mean, I don't have the ready to go answer for that. It's trying to learn, trying to figure it out as we go. So we are at time. I will put up the feedback slide. If you've got a question, I'll take it afterwards happily. Thank you so much for being here. Have a wonderful time at SQL Bits.